The world is waiting for the sunrise and dream
When I hear Les Paul, I first of all think about a person who must have been really, really busy, because we all know that he was really instrumental in inventing the electric guitar, and he really experimented a lot with the electric guitar. It was definitely his idea to use a solid piece of wood, and that through that solidity would come the kind of sustain and musicality that he was looking for. And it definitely worked. Then you start thinking about all the stuff he did in the recording end also. He was really an innovator in modern recording techniques. It's almost like he was the person who invented the sound of today's pop records.
I guess to begin at the beginning, I was born in Waukesha, Wisconsin. I guess everybody knows where Waukesha is, but for you two that might not know, it's 18 miles from Milwaukee, west. And at about the age of 7, something happened to me, and I became interested in music and electronics. And it all happened on an Indian mound. The Indians buried their dead in a mound. And we sat on this mound where we always used to supplement our newspapers and make our paper routes. In supplementing the papers, I noticed this one fellow was winding this wire on this empty roll of toilet roll, and he's going 18, 19, 20. I says, Harry, what in the world are you doing? And he says, I'm making a crystal set. And I says, what's a crystal set? And he says, you don't know? He says, that's the newest thing. You know, you can hear radio without it, with no batteries, no nothing. So I built a crystal set. And when I built the crystal set, of course, I heard a guitar on there. And, of course, then I wanted a guitar. Well, I saved up my money from the paper route and sent the Sears notebook, and I got the guitar. I couldn't reach around and play all the 6 strings, so I took 1 string off and played 5. And then as I grew a little older and could stretch a little farther, I got the 6th string on. Then with the crystal set, I heard the harmonica player playing what we call backwards, where you draw instead of blow. So if the harmonica says C, and you draw, you're in G. Well, G is the key that you play in, and then you're playing the funky blues. Well, that got me through school. They saw that I was a dreamer, and I wasn't interested in the cotton gin. I was interested in the music. And that's when I took the name Red Hot Red, the Wizard from Waukesha. When I went to bed at night, I used to have a spool of thread, and I tied it on my toe and threw the spool out the window, and it was for emergency only. There was a little note on there, don't pull unless it's an emergency. And they're yanking on this thread, and I slid down in my shorts down the drain pipe, and I says, you know, you woke me up. And he says, it's worth it, Buzz. Red, he says, there's a guitar player playing past the 3rd fret. And I says, that's for cosmetic purposes only. There's nothing up there past the 3rd fret. So I says, forget it. He says, I'm telling you, Red, there's a guy out there. So that night we went out, and they lifted me through the men's room window, and I stood there looking at this fellow, and it was Joe Overton. And Joe was playing way up the fingerboard, running up and down that thing like a fool. And I looked at it, I couldn't believe it. And he asked me, he says, are you interested in the guitar? I said, I sure am. And he says, well, here, play something. And I played for him. And he says, let me show you some stuff. And he said, I'll be back in 2 weeks. We're going to play here again. Came back in 2 weeks. I had it all, plus I had more than what he'd showed me. And he says, well, this is fantastic. He says, you're very good. And let me tell the boss about it. So he told the boss about it, Rube Tronson. And Rube hired me. Well, he hired me, and he fired the guy that taught me the guitar. Well, I didn't know that until I met the band in Escanaba, Michigan. I says, where's Joe? And they says, well, he's no longer with us. The next part of the story is that Joe called me from Missouri. And he says, Les, he says, you know, I got bumped from the band, but he says, how about you and I forming a duo? Why don't you come down here to Springfield, Missouri, and we'll open a radio station. Those were the real early days of radio. That was 50 watts. But in no time at all, we were moved to Chicago, where we started recording. And I went to a course from the country music into jazz in Chicago, and stepped from $1,000 a week down to $8 a week. And part of my job was busting the bubble for a bubble dancer and playing piano and sweeping the floor and everything else, and just to play with the Louis Armstrongs and Coleman Hawkins and Roy Eldridge and Tatum and so forth.